Jordan, you are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The NSPCC says a new hotline to report concerns about sexual abuse in football received more than 50 calls within its first 2 hours today. It was set up after several former players, including ex-England internationals, have come forward to say they were abused by coaches when they were boys. Our sports editor Dan Rowan has been speaking to former England international Paul Stewart.
They're the former footballers whose revelations have sent shockwaves through the game. All four have now gone public with claims they were victims of sexual abuse while playing for youth teams in the northwest of England. This is the paedophile that three of them say they were victims of. Barry Bennell, a former coach at Crewe, who was imprisoned in 1998 after pleading guilty to sex offences against boys. Former England player Paul Stewart says he was abused by a different coach while playing for a junior club in Manchester in the mid-70s. Today he told me about his ordeal.
How severe was the abuse that you suffered then?
Horrific for me. Horrific.
How long did it go on for?
4 years. Almost every day. He was threatening that he'd kill my parents and my two brothers if I ever spoke out about this. He made two of us perform a sexual act on him, and he also abused another player that was in a team younger than mine.
Stewart, who had a successful career at clubs like Spurs and Liverpool, says the man who abused him repeatedly referred to Bennell's assaults and fears they could have been in contact.
My hope would be that it isn't as widespread as a Jimmy Savile, then I know that not as many have suffered, but my belief is that there's hundreds. This has not been easy for me to do, but I felt that I needed to do this so that other people will come out.
Today, Andy Woodward, the first player to speak out, was at Wembley for talks with the FA.
They've assured me that they are going to do everything they can for every single player, and that's what I went in there for, nothing else, just so we can be protected, and the kids and the parents now that are out there, we all should be protected.
Hello, you're through to the NSPCC.
Today, the FA set up a dedicated helpline with the NSPCC. Within 2 hours of its launch, it had received over 50 calls.
What we've got to do is to make sure that those victims are supported, that this doesn't turn into an exercise by football trying to protect its own reputation. Our job is to protect the victims and make sure there are no more victims. And we'll take that on the chin, we'll hold ourselves to account, we'll work closely with the police and the victims, and I will meet any victim who comes forward, as I met one today.
Tonight, Crewe's director of football and former manager Dario Gradi released a statement saying he knew nothing of Bennell's abuse at the club. But questions remain over whether the sports authorities could and should have done more to protect young footballers.
Well, here at Crewe Alexandra, they're continuing tonight with their own inquiries, and the fear is that this extends well beyond now this club and well beyond Barry Bennell. This story is developing. Tomorrow we understand that two other former footballers will waive their anonymity and say that they were also sexually abused when young footballers. They'll speak via the BBC. The question now, just how far did this extend? How many footballers were affected, and could it have all have been avoided?
Dan, thank you very much.
There is a real worry in English football that a number of claims of historical sexual abuse against former coaches in the game could be the start of something much, much bigger. So far, 4 former professionals have come forward. Today, the chairman of the FA said he wanted any other victims to have the confidence to do the same.
For decades, they have carried the secrets of what they suffered as young players trying to make the grade. Now they're determined to shine a light on one of football's darkest, most shameful places. Andy Woodward has an appointment at Wembley. Not the sort he dreamt of as a player, but a visit to English football's headquarters to discuss the abuse he suffered as a youth player and to ask for help for all who suffered as he did.
We do deserve it, you know. We went through hell, and you know, I've spoken to them. It's like when I start talking about them, I get really emotional because they've all suffered as me, and I'm still suffering now myself.
Young footballers were preyed on. The scale of exploitation dating back to the 70s only now becoming clear. Paul Stewart, who went on to play for England, has revealed he was systematically abused by his youth coach. David White of Manchester City in England says the same happened to him. Steve Walters, who played for Crewe Alexandra, tells a similar horrific story, while it was Andy Woodward, also ex-Crewe, who first broke years of silent suffering. 3 of those players have named former talent scout and youth coach Barry Burnell as their abuser. He had links to clubs like Crewe Alexandra, Stoke City and Manchester City. In 1998, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison after pleading guilty to sexual offences against boys as young as 9. Ian Ackley was one of Burnell's victims, the abuse starting when he was just 10 and being taken by his coach for trials at clubs like Manchester City.
I was raped hundreds of times. I'd go on a Friday and not come back till a Sunday. He'd often make excuses that the weather was bad or there was some reason why I should stay over for more days, so I'd miss school. So you know, it was anywhere and everywhere that he could take advantage, really.
20 years ago, Ian Ackley gave evidence against Burnell. Back then, he says the football authorities ignored the problem.
It was a dirty little subject that people wanted to get done with and brushed away under the carpet. No one wanted to be associated with anything.
The current FA chairman says they're listening now.
We're going to make sure that no stone is left unturned in making sure that there isn't a new generation of victims, and the victims who have been hurt are truly helped.
And an apology would be a good start, this victim says.
I think it's about time people actually said, yes, we made a mistake. We didn't keep these children safe.
But at least now, people are starting to take notice.
And Paul is at the FA headquarters in Wembley tonight. Paul, you heard some pretty harrowing testimony there in your report from Ian Ackley, having been saying he'd been raped hundreds of times. Are the FA taking these claims seriously now?
Yes, Raggy, it does seem that after years of inertia, denial even, that this disturbing issue is at last being addressed. The FA chairman has told us that as well as helping those ex-players who are still suffering from abuse they suffered as youngsters, he's written today to all his clubs, big and small, 30,000 of them, warning them to tighten up their safeguards to protect today's young players. Of course, it's all happening because of those players who are coming forward and saying that this happened to them when they were youngsters. There's a real momentum there, and it is growing. Tonight, a former player from Newcastle United has said that he too was abused as a junior by his youth coach, and I understand that 2 new players will be coming forward tomorrow to tell the world of their experiences.
Paul at Wembley, thank you very much indeed. An issue that is gathering momentum. Thank you, Paul.